we're going to deal with lists. Now, lists are similar to arrays, and you'll see some of these labs reference the term an array. Well, they are very similar. They're not the same, though. The logic behind both is very, very similar. So once you understand one, you can pick up the other quite easy. The catch is, in Python, they did not use or did not create an array. So there is no array class. We can't make an instance of an array in Python, but we do have the functionality of lists. And since they are so similar, the logic behind the list will get us where we need to go for these assignments. So this one, they do call it a list basics in Python. And we have to navigate through a couple of lists. So let's start out. They've given us max averages, and the individual is going to enter in 8 batting averages. So we have to expect that they're going to follow our direction, and they are actually going to enter in 8 values, and those values will meet the requirements that we've set. So we're not setting any input validation or verification along with the code. We're just assuming everything is the way it's supposed to be. So we've got in here that they're inputting an average string. So they're giving us the batting average, converting it to a float, and then we have to take that value and assign it to a position within the list. Like I said, you're going to see them use the word array everywhere. So we're going to declare our list, which the declaration is quite similar to declaring an array. And our declaration, let's call it averages, because I believe they use the term here, averages. And this 0, that's the index, the position that we are within this list. So we'll say averages, and in our declaration, we will say is equal to, and we'll use square braces because lists and arrays, they're both, you recognize them by seeing these square braces. Now, the analogy or the comparison example that I use is arrays and lists are like trains. They're like cars within a train that are coupled together. Now we'll just look at the engine that's pulling these cars. That's identifying the name of the array or the list itself. So we'll say this is train averages. And in train averages, there will be 8 cars. Max averages is 8. So our train will have 8 cars. Each car has a position number. The position numbers in programming, we don't start counting at 1 like you're used to. We start counting with 0. So when I start with car 0, that's the first car. Car 2 would be the third car. Car 0, 1, 2, 3. So 0 through 7 is 8 cars. I initialize this as a list with nothing in it. So I've reserved some memory for a list called averages, but I've put nothing in it. So let's come down and we're going to create a loop so that we can populate that list or put something in each one of those 8 cars. So let's create a loop, and we'll do a for loop. For I in range, and now what's the range? I only need for a range to have the value that we're dealing with, which is this max average is how far. So I'm going to copy that and paste it into that range So we're passing the value within max averages, which is 8, to this function range. I don't need to put the initial starting point because by default it'll start at 0. So what you've seen in the past, we'd say start at 0 and end at the max value. So for I in range, 8 values, 0 through 7, we're going to do whatever we have as indented. Let's close that out with the colon. Delete to make sure that our indentation and spacing is the way that it's supposed to be. So we should be aligned right below the I. So in that loop, what's going to happen is they're going to ask the user for input. It's going to be converted to a float. And then we have to take that value and put it into those rail cars in my example. Put it into the positions and averages. So it will be averages I is now equivalent to batting average. So each time we go through this loop, we take whatever's been input that's in batting average and we put it into averages with the index of I. Every time we go through this loop, the index increases by 1. So I is 0, 1, 2, 3, and goes up. So that'll get us through there. It's not going to actually write it the way we want it to write it, though. So we would think, hey, I can take this batting average and I'll just put it in there. Well, unfortunately, it's not going to work that way. We've got to take this section right here, and we're going to use some functionality that is associated with the list class. So a list has the ability to add something to the end of it. Currently, we don't have anything in our list. So let's append to our list. And what are we going to append to the end of it? Batting average. So every time we go through it, we actually add something to the end of the list. We're not putting anything into a specific position. So we just append to the end. So we've added a new value to the end of the list at each position. And from here, we've got to calculate some average. So that populated the list. Now we've got a total equals averages 0. This won't work. Change that to total equals 0. If we do what they've got, the code's not going to work, and we're going to have a problem. So we're going to change that total equals 0, and we're going to do the same logic that we had up here. We're going to copy that loop, and we'll paste our loop there, and that'll get us through the entire list. And what we've got to check is to find out, I'll tab in, if, now min average, we set it equal to whatever the default value was, whatever the lowest value is. Or I should say the first, what's in that first train car, that's the example that I gave you. So if averages I, whatever's in the first position, is less than min average, and I've got to have that colon there to close out that condition. So I come down, I'm indented. So now this is part of that conditional statement. This only happens if it's true. Now, if that's true, then min average will become whatever's in that position. So it only happens if that's a true statement. Let's back this up and make sure the indentation is right. Now that underline went away. So let's take that same code, we'll bring it down here, tab it in so our indentation's right, and instead of less than, we'll go greater than, and copy max average and put that in here. So we're saying if averages is greater than max average, then now that's the newest high number. So this goes through, and if whatever's in there is the highest number in the comparison, then that becomes the highest number. It works its way all the way through the whole list to find out and compare each one, which one's the highest. So let's come down, total equals what? We want to increase each one. So let's say total plus averages I. So each time we go through, it increases what's in total. So that'll find out what the total average is. Now we've got to divide that by our given max averages to find out what the actual average is. So the average, what is it that we want to have for an average? So average is equivalent to total divided by that constant we were given, max averages. That'll happen one time, it's not indented. And then we have to print out a couple of lines. We've got 3 lines we have to print out, and if we don't print them out precisely, this thing's going to throw you an error. So what we want to do is we want to print minimum batting average is space, close our quote, plus str, open it up, we'll pass that min average. Let's copy that line, paste it, change that from minimum to maximum, and just copy that max average and paste it in there. So we've got 2 of the 3 out of the way. Now we have to come up with what the average is. So let's paste that same line again, and we'll just modify it. And the string we need is average batting average is. I know it sounds redundant, but it is what it is. And let's come up And we'll put in there that value, average. Okay, so all three outputs are there. Let's test it, see what they say. It says I've got an issue. Let's go look and see what the issue is. And the issue says maximum batting average is, what's wrong with it? See right there, you can see what the issue is. So I want to go through and do things wrong here and there so you can see when you go to do it what to look for. 3 of the tests, 2 of them are right and 1's wrong. So if we get rid of that, test it again, we're good. We passed both tests, and now they're green on all 3. And on the second one, green on all 3. So it's all straightforward in how we're dealing with it if we go and compare these lists to a train and the train cars. Each time we go through this loop, it checks to see what's in the first car, the second car, the third car, the fourth car, and so on. When we populate it, it populates the first car, the second car. How do we know how many cars? Well, there's how many times we're going to go through this loop to go populate it. We don't have to know what that number is. They just defined it for us. All right. So I'll